right. All right, I believe we are recording now. So I have Captain Teresa Allen on the line. This is our first inaugural female physician leadership series. And so I do want to thank everyone for joining today. Captain Allen is joining us. She is our Deputy Corps Chief in the Navy Medical Corps. And she has been in that role since August of this year. Before that, she was the commanding officer at NMRTC Jacksonville, and where she led the transition to Genesis, I know, as well as a wonderful team there. Prior to that, she was actually my XO at it was NMRTC and also Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton out in California. She has a very extensive career. She's a family medicine with OB fellowship trained physician. She's been a program director. She is has done amazing things in the Navy. And thank you so much for joining us today and for giving our inaugural talk today at the Female Physician Leadership Series.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for dialing in. While I was waiting, I was scrolling through the names and I saw a lot of familiar names, and I wish you were in the same room and I could give you all hugs and catch up with you. But I'm really honored that you called in and for this talk this evening. And it really is a talk and a conversation. So as much as this medium will allow, please ask questions if they come up or chime in. I've given this talk with this set of PowerPoint slides different ways to different groups over the last couple years. This is one of the first times I've done it completely virtually like this. We tried it one other time, but and so we'll see how it goes. Feedback is always good. And so we'll try it. And I hope that you find it useful and enjoyable. It should be a little bit entertaining too. So that it was worth your evening. So I'm going to share a set of slides with you and we'll start there. So just sharing those now. Jen, if they don't come across for some reason, let me know. But there should be a first slide there. And the talk is leadership, be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. And there's a lot of joys to leadership and there's a lot of heartache. And we're going to explore that a little bit tonight, as well as sometimes how we get there and why we get there. So not just objectives. So if any of you are really into adult education and are working with the residents, we always start with objectives, right? We're going to tell them what we're going to tell them, then we give the presentation, and then at the end we kind of wrap it all up and with reviewing those objectives and making sure we met them. The BUMed, the Bureau of Navy Medicine, uses a resource called the Jorgen Learning Center, and they came up with this CPO, or context, purpose, and outcome. And so that's what I'm going to use tonight with you. So first, why is this lecture or this talk or whatever, what is it? Why is it important? Well, first of all, you're all leaders. I'm giving this, the context of this conversation tonight is with fellow leaders. By the virtue of being physicians, being in the Navy, officers, you are leaders. And so that's where we're starting tonight. I hope by the end of this evening that you take with you, what I want you to understand is that leadership is a lifelong learning process, just like medicine. We're never quite there. It's something that we're continuously developing. And if you think, you've mastered it and you're done, probably take another deep breath and look internally, because I don't think we're ever quite finished learning about medicine. We're never quite finished learning about leadership. And what do I hope you take away or do with the information that we're going to share tonight? So you're going to see these things at the bottom. They're kind of green, but I call them my blues clues, and they're resources for you. And so the first one is the Jorgen Learning Center. It is paid for via BUMED, and they do a lot for commands with leadership development. They provide executive coaching for a lot of the commanding officers. In my entire time, I was an XO and CO. I had an executive coach. This was a great person for me to bounce things off of, to practice conversations when you're going to have a difficult conversation. If I didn't think a meeting or a conversation went well, this was a great resource for me to go back and kind of unpack that with somebody who was not emotionally invested in the outcome. And so I really thought this was a great resource that they paid for. And it's always good to use the resources that are being provided for us. It doesn't come at extra cost to the command. And so I recommend to commands that this is one resource. But throughout these slides, you're going to see resources like this, and we'll talk about them. And my outcome tonight is, I hope one of these resonates with you and you put it in your toolbox. And so this is the first one, but that's my outcome. I'm hoping is that I give you at least one tool for your leadership toolbox tonight. So Tale of Two Titles. When I was first asked about giving a talk on leadership, I had two titles in mind, and I teach and I give presentations, and when I was speaking as a commanding officer, I use stories. So tonight I'm going to start with my story. Some of you may know it. I looked at the list of names, and there are a few of you that know me pretty well. So the story I'm about to tell you, you may have heard before, but it bears retelling, as well as it is very applicable to when we're talking about leadership. So the two titles I had, one was Thank You for Telling Me No. And then what we have, Leadership, Be Careful What You Ask For, You Just Might Get It. So my story in Navy medicine and in medicine begins, over 20 years ago when I came into Navy medicine and decided to go into family medicine. And if you pull my CV, right now, the first 10 years of my career are very academic heavy. I was completely building a CV that was going to get me into an academic institution. I did a fellowship in obstetrics. I also did a fellowship in faculty development. I was teaching at Camp Lejeune, and I was slated to be their incoming residency director for the program there. I was completely excited, and in some ways thought that was going to be the pinnacle job of my career, being a residency director at the Navy, and then potentially going to a civilian career and continuing in academics. Or teaching at USU or something. That was the path I had put myself on, and I had built a really nice CV to be successful in that path. And then life happened, and I had Helen, who she is now 12, but many of you have probably met her. And if you haven't, she was born at 25 weeks in 4 days. We were at Camp Lejeune, and I was transferred to UNC because of how sick I was and how premature she was going to be. We spent 137 days in that NICU. And when we came back, I really still wanted to do the residency director job. And we, as a family, made some sacrifices and tried to figure out how that would work. And I will tell you, it wasn't. And the commanding officer at the time basically told me, this isn't working. I don't think you need to be the residency director right now. And that was devastating to me. And like I said, I had built a career around this, and I ended up at Portsmouth to take care of Helen, which was the right decision for my family. And it turned out to be an amazing career decision. So thank you for telling me no. To that person who said, no, I don't think this is your time. And I walked away. I went to Portsmouth, where I thought family medicine doctors went to die. I really did. It was the med-sen, and family medicine doctors, don't deliver babies there. Well, I did. Some of you were at Portsmouth with me, and, I ended up delivering babies, and I ended up developing an amazing career there that took me down a path of executive medicine that I may never have explored had somebody not told me no. So I say that to you in that if you're in a place in your career where you feel like you're pushing really hard and banging your head against a wall, pick your head up and look around. There may be a door sitting wide open, waiting for you to walk through it. And that was executive medicine for me. Leadership, be careful what you ask for. I wasn't sure that that's what I wanted, but I knew I wanted to make some change, and I wanted to do it for the right reasons, and that how we practice medicine was important to me. And so I continued to ask those hard questions, and I found myself in those leadership positions that ended up leading me to being a commanding officer, and now the Navy's deputy corps chief. But that's, I will tell you, you show the promise and you ask the hard questions, the jobs will come to you. And you know what? I didn't have to bang my head against the wall nearly so hard for that. So it was probably the right door for me, where academics, I felt like I was trying so hard and not getting where I necessarily wanted to at that moment. So that is my story. I tell it to you, hopefully that it helps some of you in different career paths where you are, to know that life happens, and that's okay. It's okay that those things change. And we may be telling you as leaders that we see the potential in you in places you didn't even see it in yourself. And that's really what happened for me, is somebody saw potential that I did not necessarily see. So now I have a video I want to show you. So to get you out of this, we're going to talk a little bit about what leadership is. And I want to show you this clip. So I have to change the screen I'm sharing with you. Be a second. Something is wrong. You know what, Jen? I think while we had it all pulled up.
Did the page close?
Yep. Wow, and we practiced this, right? We knew something was not going to go quite the way we had planned it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we practiced it right before to make sure that it would work. Okay. Hey, Jen, can you see it now? No, you can't. Okay, hold on. Okay.
I can see it, ma'am.
You can see it now? Okay. So
Mhm.
I'm going to start this. Can you hear it too?
You've learned a lot about leadership.
Yes, ma'am.
First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is over-glorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit. But you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
So hopefully that came through. Jen, did that come through okay?
Yes, ma'am, it did. It was wonderful. It was great.
So hopefully you enjoyed that. Obviously, leadership is not for the faint of heart. There are going to be times when you're asked to do some interesting things. And this is pictures of my leadership team when I was at Jacksonville. And I love them dearly. And yeah, sometimes we did some silly things for our crew. It was obviously during COVID, my 2 years in command, and there were a lot of events that we couldn't do. So we tried to make the absolute most of the ones that we could and have a good time with it. But yes, as leaders, it's important that you're enjoying what you do, that you surround yourself with amazing people. And I've been blessed with that, with just absolutely an amazing CMC and XO when I was in command. And then they lost my slides? What?
Yeah, I think you just forgot to reshare your slides, ma'am.
Okay, let's go back. Share.
We have them now. Yep.
You have them? You have them now when I do
Yes.
that? Okay,
Yes,
so I
ma'am.
was talking about my amazing team and some of the crazy things we did. And as I was saying, leadership's not for the faint of heart. And yes, sometimes we probably looked a little bit like the crazy dancing guy and the first follower out there, but we enjoyed it. And it is important that you have a good time when you're doing it and that you're surrounded by a great team, and that you make the most of that team. So that's was my team. So leadership styles, we'll talk a little bit about leadership styles. There are tons of different ideas out there about how to lead and what leadership styles work. And some of these are going to feel very comfortable to you. Some leadership styles fit like a glove, right? And you just know that you're good at them. Other ones are much more uncomfortable. And there are ones we aspire to, right? And I would take you all the way over to the one side of the slide where it says 7 styles of leadership. And as much as I like this slide for talking about the different types of leadership, it makes me feel like, blue is good and red is bad. And I will tell you that that is, in my opinion, not the case. Yes, I would love to aspire to be the wisdom and visionary and impart that on my team. And there are days that I probably occasionally accomplish that. More often than not, I probably lived in number 4 as a facilitator and influencer, where I was able to help the team forward. But there are times, and I think we saw it a lot in the last 2 years with COVID and some of the things that were going on in this world, where you have to be the crisis director. Some of you, I'm sure, are surgeons out there, and you're in the operating room and you need to call for blood. It's not time to ask everyone how they feel about that or get lots of opinions. You really, in that moment, are giving orders, and later afterwards there is time to go back and discuss it and debrief and talk about how that worked and what was good and what was bad. But in that moment, you are a crisis director, so it's important that you are aware of your own style and what feels good and what you like, but it is also very good to lean into the ones that are harder for you, and that don't necessarily feel as comfortable. And if you look on this slide there, the middle one at the bottom says laissez-faire. And I would say that was the one that going into senior leadership, I was the least comfortable with. I have history of being, I'm OB fellowship trained. I've been in an operating room and called for blood. So I can direct a crisis and I build teams and I really enjoy that part of my job. And I can paint a picture as far as visionary, but laissez-faire, really to be kind of hands off and to step back, is a hard place for me. And you would think, okay, well, that's because it might not be a great form of leadership. But then you get a team of directors where they are absolutely positively the best of the best and subject matter experts in their field. And you realize as the XO or CO, you have to step back and give them the room and the top cover to succeed. And that feels a little laissez-faire, hands off. And it doesn't mean you're being ineffective. It means you recognize talent and you're giving talent the chance to succeed. You need to obviously provide the environment for it to succeed, but you need not to get into their weeds. And sometimes, I've had directors who were just phenomenal people who just knew so much about what they were doing in their field that it was much better for me and for the command if I did not micromanage that situation. And so that's my challenge to you with this one, is I put that out there, and is to lean into the ones and figure out where you need those as much as the ones that are comfortable for you. So, hey, there's no single, I think we talked about this, there's no single best way. I think there are definitely strings that go through. We all know what good leadership looks like and feels like. We've also been part of leadership groups where it didn't feel as good. It wasn't good leadership, and we knew that. And so it's easy to know when it's really good and when it's really bad, but there's always that middle ground. And I think these traits right here, everyone would say are ones that people tend to like. So to my blues clue, a good read, Turn the Ship Around. So I have had virtually every leadership team that I have been a part of or led, that I've been the leader of, read this book. And I just really like it. So David Marquette was a commander of a submarine. And part of the story is he was a subject matter expert, and he had spent years developing that expertise of a particular class of submarine. I can't remember, it was one of the fast attacks. And he, in the last minutes before he was to report for command, got called in and was handed a submarine he really knew very little about. It was a different class of submarine. It was the Santa Fe, and it was considered the worst ship in the fleet. And the story, and it is written as a story with leadership nuggets at the end of each chapter, is about how that crew pulled together and really turned that ship from the worst in the fleet to the best. And I really liked a lot of the language he used in it, and I used a lot of the language he had from this book in my leadership style and with my teams. So I often ask them, so this is a recommended read, Blues Clue. I hope you can take some of it maybe with you. So here is some of the language that he used in this book and how he compared it. So empowering language versus disempowering language. And my favorite is the first under the empowering. I intend to. And I really like that statement. And we ask our learners often to tell us what their intent is, right? And what they want to do, what their plan is, not to come to us and say, tell me what to do. You see this with medical students, those of you that are in GME, right? The medical student or the brand new intern that just got there in July comes to you and has done a really good job of taking a history, and maybe has got a great physical on a piece of paper, and then they stand there and look at you. And they just kind of wait. And I was, back then, was really good when I was teaching all the time at the silence. And I would just stand there and look at them and wait. And eventually, one of us would break, and I'd be like, so what is the plan? And wait for them to tell me the plan, and give me what they were thinking before there was course correction or before I asked too many more questions, so that I would hear their honest thoughts. And so with your teams, I would always encourage that when they come to you with an issue, that you encourage them not to just tell you their issue, but to tell you what their intent is to fix it. Really, I would love it when people come in and say, hey, I intend to do this, and this is why. I would be like, awesome, because that took it all off of, in some ways, all off of my plate, unless it was going in a direction that wasn't great. And that, by that statement, they gave me a moment to maybe slightly redirect without it being me telling them completely what to do, but just to ask a few more clarifying questions, and maybe ask them, had they thought about this or that, which was a much better way, I think, to get people ready for the next level of leadership than to just tell them what to do. And so you can see the difference in the language, and that really comes from that book, Turn the Ship Around. So your role as a leader, and really leadership as you get higher up is more and more about making sure you're painting that picture and giving people vision. Not managing the day-to-day details. And like I said, that was hard for me, certainly in the beginning, with that whole laissez-faire idea. It is important in the military that we are have the appearance that we need to, and that we understand the basics. I am big about using all the tools that are given to us. And so you'll see the next one, communication, those come from Team Steps. And I will tell you, Team Steps is not just for board turnover. Closed loop communication works in every part of your life, including your home with your, preteen. It works well. I like SBAR, and I often, even if it isn't labeled SBAR, when I write an email, especially to my boss, I think about those things like, what is the situation? What is the background they need? What's my assessment and recommendation? Again, recommendation, right? What I intend to or what I recommend is done. And so when I'm leading up, which is just as important as leading down or sideways, I think about an SBAR when I'm writing my email. Even if I don't label it that way, I make sure those elements are clear and concise in usually bullet points for an email. I think it works with email communication. Again, my Blues Crew at the bottom is another book. It's a Brene Brown book, Dare to Lead. It is another one that I have given many a person. And I will tell you, this book came to me right as I was starting my executive officer tour. It came from a mentor, a retired captain, Robert Sorensen, a great family medicine doctor who was faculty when I was a resident and then went on into executive medicine. And right as I was starting my executive tour, this book showed up in the mail. And you know how somebody just knows what you need at the right moment? This book was the book I needed at that moment. Dare to Lead. So I had been preparing to go into executive medicine and to be an XO, and some amazing people who I really respect and are senior leaders in our organization and other organizations were telling me that the commanding officer and the XO never have a bad day. They were like, they can never have a bad day. And there's truth to that statement, right? You can't run around like your hair's on fire, right? In the emergency room, for those of your ER docs, right? If the emergency room physician's nervous and upset and yelling orders, everybody gets tense, right? So there is a certain amount of that that is true, but we are human beings. And there are bad days in our lives. And I found in this book, she talks about the power of that vulnerability. And that's what she calls it. There is power in vulnerability. And those of you that have sat on my boards, there are a few I saw on the line, know that, there is a morning or two that I walked in just at the right before the meeting was going to start and wasn't as polished as I wanted to be. And the tagline I always said was the ponytails didn't go in right this morning, which probably meant that Helen couldn't find her homework, or she didn't like the way I braided her hair that day, or something didn't go right with my child and my life at home. And I'm a real person, and I needed to take a deep breath and be honest about that and clear that out of the air before we could move on with what was really important for our day that day. And even in my KEB as the commanding officer, we would take, and this came really from the Jorgensen Learning Center, we would take sometimes the first 2 or 3 minutes of the meeting just to talk about where our brains were right that minute, so that we could focus and be present for each other. And so Dare to Lead came to me when I was really nervous about being perceived as perfect and realizing that I wasn't going to be, and I wasn't going to be, it was impossible for me to be perfect and appear that way to everybody all the time. And instead, I found the power to just be really honest and vulnerable with people about sometimes where my life really was those days. So leadership expectations. This is where I'm going to ask you all, and we're going to try this. We'll see. how it goes to do this exercise. When I do this in person, I have a different exercise that I do with everybody, but since we're online, we'll try it this way. In the end, I'm going to ask that we all share our camera for just a quick minute. So those of you that can share your camera, once we do the exercise, I'll tell you when, but I'll ask if you would. But I ask you to take that piece of paper that you got in the beginning that Jen asked people to have. So if you don't have a piece of paper, if you can just grab any old piece of paper, doesn't matter if it has something on it or not. I wouldn't have it be an important, certificate or something, but, and then I would ask that you fold it in half. You fold that piece of paper in half. Okay, everyone hopefully has the piece of paper folded in half. In a second. And then if you would tear off the top right-hand corner and then fold it in half again. And tear off the bottom right-hand corner. And then I'm going to ask you to fold it in half again and tear off the top left-hand corner and fold it in half one more time. And the bottom left-hand corner, if you would tear that off. Okay. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, wait. This. Sharing. If everyone would open that piece of paper up and then share it via their camera. So if you can, oh, I didn't mean to turn my camera off. Everyone share theirs. Some of them are pretty funny. Somebody's got a really small one there. Some have got big holes in them. Some has no holes in it. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. So, are we? Yes. So the quote I used here is Abraham Lincoln. If we could first know where we are and whether we are attending, we could then better judge what to do and how to do it. Right. So everyone ended up in a different place, and that's okay because we're all different. Right. And that's kind of nice. And I always think of them as snowflakes. Everyone's unique. But as a leader, it is our job, I said it several times, to paint that picture, right? To give people the resources and direction and that they need to get there. And had I told you all in the very beginning that you were going to make a snowflake, and given those directions, maybe a little more specifically, maybe we all would have ended up in the same place. Maybe not, but I think it is our job as leaders to make sure that we are providing, the resources and the direction that is clear and not excess, right? You don't need to talk a whole bunch about giving people information that they don't need, right? And so take that with you. Sometimes, like I said, when I'm in person, I have people build puzzles and I have missing pieces, and I see how they handle that situation because, and I don't tell them exactly how to build the puzzle. Sometimes I don't give them the picture on the box. And so it gives them that sense of, if as leaders, if we give you the box, right? If I give you the picture and I let you kind of know where you're headed at the end, and what the end product should look like, you may get there in 1,000 different ways, and your way may be better and more creative, which would be great, but at least we know where we're headed. And I think that's that is my take on my expectation, usually of my leaders is, tell me where we're going. Tell me what you hope the product at the end is going to look like, and I can get you there. So we'll finish up back with the context, purpose, and outcome, right? And so we're all leaders. All of you on this line are fantastic leaders, and have accomplished much. And that's how we started this out. Like medicine, leadership requires lifelong learning. Never quite reach there. I don't know exactly where there is, but we're never quite made it. There's always one more thing to learn. I can always improve and get better. And so I'm continuously looking for ways to make myself a better leader, and to improve the situation that I'm in and the people around me, and make it better for them. It's really, for me, it's always about the people and making it better for the people around me. And then I hope I gave you one resource. Like I said, I put them in the little Blue's Clues at the bottom of the slides. I hope one thing resonated with you and you put it in your toolbox and you share it with somebody, on your teams, over the next few weeks, and that it makes your teams stronger and better. So that was my ultimate goal, for this. And I'm going to take the slides down one more time, back and forth. And I'm happy to answer questions. I think we have a few minutes, obviously, for questions. They said sometimes this goes longer or shorter depending on the activity, but I hope that you found it enjoyable and that you found something that useful out of it. So if there are any questions.
So first off, ma'am, I'd just like to say thank you so much for doing this. And we do have some questions, I think, so I will get off the mic. Sorry. Go ahead, everyone.
Hello, Captain Allen, Kelly Elmore. Thank you so much for doing this. Amazing. I loved it. It was wonderful. Question. So you mentioned a little bit about, some days you're not able to show up as your full self because of something that potentially happened in the morning before you got there. Can you just expand upon that in regards to realizing that you do have the resources and the tools and you are enough to be where you are?
So I do think it's important to talk about that we're lots of different people for we are different people for different for different people, right? I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a doctor, and that is a lot. And you're right, it is enough to be who I am and to be who I am that day. And that's why that book really spoke to me at that moment, is because I felt like I was going to have to put on a persona of perfection as an executive. And that's not who I am. I'm not perfect, but that's okay. And I think it was good for my board to see that sometimes I'm a mom and sometimes that took up my energy that morning. And they're important, the board is important, and I need to be present for them, but it might take me a minute, and that's okay. And so I found power in that. I thought that was a very powerful way to share that with people. And I felt that made us a stronger team and ultimately do some great things as a team, because they learned that they could show up and I would understand what was going on in their life, and that we could share that for a moment and put it on the table. And sometimes that's all it takes, is that moment to put it on the table, right? This is what's going on. And then I can focus on you, Kelly, and give you my full attention. But sometimes I have to tell you, hey, this was happening. And now I'm here for you. But I'm sorry if I wasn't a second ago, right? And I think that's important to recognize, is where I was going with that. You know.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ma'am, we have some questions in the chat that I'm going to read for you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So one is, you mentioned a few books, and if you have a reading list that you would recommend. And so that's one, we can kind of save that to later or maybe to think about. But the other one is, how have you dealt with decreased clinical time as you have taken on more executive roles?
It's a balance, right? So I have been able to maintain, as a family medicine doctor, general family medicine credentials, and a lot of women's health procedures, but I am not delivering babies anymore. And there was a moment in my career where that had to be a deliberate decision, right? I knew I was screening to be an executive officer, and that it would not be fair to the patient. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of patient safety, and I think we need to be honest with ourselves. And I knew that being primary surgeon was not going to be, you can't just dabble in that. And so it is a definite choice that you have to make. There is no perfect balance. We talk about life, life-work balance. There is no perfect balance, right? Some days I'm a really good mom. Some days I'm a really good doctor. Some days I'm a good executive. There is no perfect balance. It's a teeter-totter. And so certainly the step into executive medicine pushed that teeter-totter away from being the clinician I had been. Now, do I think I'm a better leader than I was 7, 8 years ago? Absolutely. And do I have an entirely different skill set? Absolutely, that I have developed. But I am not, when I was done after 5 years of being faculty, I was on top of my game clinically. And there has been some push and pull there and sacrifice. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that for anybody. There is some sacrifice, and you have to find out that you're comfortable with that sacrifice for executive medicine. But we need physician leaders. There have to be physicians in those boardrooms. We think differently, and we make decisions differently. And the team is better when there is a physician voice, a nurse voice, an MSc voice, and a dental voice. You have to have the whole gamut at the table. And so that's really important. And so I need some of you to step up, but it will be a sacrifice to clinical practice. And
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions? I have one, but I don't want to monopolize.
it's okay.
Well, then I'll ask my question. So, given that this is really put on and hosted by the Council for Female Physician Recruitment and Retention, I know that we're seeing a large exodus of physicians in general, not just in the military medicine, but also in civilian medicine as well. What recommendations would you have for those of us trying to counsel, especially women physicians, to stay on in military medicine, or to improve our recruitment for those going into medical school or in medical school, that being a female physician in the military is not only doable, but is a career path that can be exciting and challenging. How would you approach that?
So I would challenge all of us that there do need to be some new solutions, right? So right now, medical schools are 50% women, which is fantastic. We bring in a great perspective to the table of medicine, right? And it's important that there are women and men in medicine. We sacrifice a lot to get there, and then we want families. I only have one child, but I had her later in life, and that was a sacrifice for me and my family that I chose. And a lot of women, not just in the military, but in medicine in general, are stepping away to have these families, right? We as women have to be open to finding them a career path back to medicine. And I challenge all of us that we need to make that possible for the women around us. We're just as bad as any male about, you know, they're pregnant and they're going to be gone for, you know, what is it now? It's not even 12 weeks, is it? Weeks now. And we get frustrated by that. But that is important that we support each other in those decisions and we make it possible for people to come back. And so there are organizations out there looking at ways to, the Navy is actually easier than other places to take a year pause as well as to find a way back, right? We do it all the time. I send you out operational for 3 years. I bring you back to an MTF and I get your skills back. We actually have a better pathway to go back and forth if I'm recruiting for just military medicine. The civilian pathway is less clear on how they get back to medicine if they take a year or two off. And so the challenge is that we need to make that the norm and normalize it for everybody. And so my argument to young women in Navy medicine having children is, you know, I have a career path back to clinical for you. I can give you a chance to go and refresh your skills. It's the same as if I sent you out on a ship for 2 years. And so, but I would say we need that across all of medicine. So it's a challenge, and it's a challenge I put out. There are more brilliant minds on this line than mine, and so I'm up for your ideas, and I will help present them. Give me your good ideas, and I am happy to help champion some of them up at the head shed. So I don't know if that was an answer or a challenge back.
Either way, it was great, ma'am. Thank you. There is a question in the chat that I can read for everyone. As you mentioned the challenges you saw with your child in the NICU, how did you balance taking care of a child with special needs or EFMP and your role as a leader? Do you have any recommendations for being a parent and being a physician and being in the Navy?
So this is different for every family. I can tell you our story and how we did it. And it was a family choice. My husband at the time was a Marine Corps officer, and he got out. He has since gone on and gotten 2 master's degrees and has been able to focus on himself. But for those first, she was so sick, you have to remember too. It wasn't just a little bit, you know, of a challenge. She was on oxygen and having multiple appointments all the time. That he got out and took care of her for the first year or so of her being out of the NICU. And then he was able to go back to work. But we made that choice that one of us had to be out because of that. Now, I definitely have leaned on the resources available to me, and I've never apologized for leaning on some of those resources. She's an EFMP, and we have needed help with her education, and I have utilized some of those resources. And frankly, the Navy has provided immense resources that a civilian practice would not have been able to provide for me. I mean, I was in the NICU with her every single day, and they put me TAD because I was more than 3 hours away from my home base. So, you know, there are resources out there. I had to get smart on them. I didn't know what all of them were. And so, but use them, use those resources. But I can't say it was easy, and I can't say that the family didn't make a sacrifice. Nikolai definitely put his career on hold for a while.
Thank you, ma'am. We still have a few minutes left. If anyone has any other questions or comments or anything, I did kind of skip over. There were many comments, ma'am, about thanking you for the talk and how inspirational it was. So I did want to say that, but those were all in the chat.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the group?
And ma'am, this is Commander Turtle. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay. So how do you lead through change? We have a lot of change going on right now with DHA and, you know, retention and recruitment challenges. What do you find that's been the most helpful ways to get people on board to ideas when we tend to have a lot of people who just like the old ways?
Well, it's a bell curve, right? There's going to be 10 to 20%, and it's probably closer to 10 that are your early adopters. And then there's the middle group, right, that will eventually get on board. And then you got like 10% at the end that are never going to get on board. So first off, you've got to acknowledge the 10% at the end that are never going to get on board. Take a deep breath and let them go, right? They're not going to get on board. Do not spend all of your time and energy trying to move that group at the end, right? Your goal is to focus on those people in the middle, the 80% or whatever it is in the middle that probably will get on board with the right coaching and prodding. So you've got your early adapters and they're going to be your champions, and you got to find them because they're your champions, right? And use them and inspire them and let them go, right? Don't micromanage them, let them go, and inspire others, right? But that group in the middle. And so that's the group you're painting the picture for. I use that metaphor a lot, right? That's the group that you have to give the picture of what the end is going to be like. I also like, was talking about, you know, my Blues Clues. I like Simon Sinek's TED Talk, Start With Why. You have to tap into that emotional piece, right? When I was looking for like philosophy for command, I listened to the book, Start With Why. It's like 7 hours. Start with the TED Talk. It's 20 minutes. It will give you 90% of what you need. So TED Talk first. But he really talks about how tapping into the why we're doing it. And it's not just the analytical data, right? The data isn't what's going to get you there. You can show people data all day long. They have to feel it, right? So they have to feel why we're doing this. They have to know, how is this going to make a difference, right? So something like Genesis, the why of, you know, this is modern medicine and blah, 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 versus the why of this is for patient safety. This is going to help us provide better care for America's heroes. That taps into something personal. And then you can give them the analytical data behind it. But you have to find that golden nugget of why you really want somebody to change and what is that emotional string you're pulling on. And then throw the data at them. That was a long answer.
Captain Davis, I see you have your hand raised.
I do. I just wanted to say, so good to see you. I wish everyone had their camera on. Thank you very much, Captain Allen, Terry, for bringing people together and to really lead with inspiration, advocacy, vulnerability. Again, appreciate the forum and the great book recommendations. I was running across my my office, and I've got the same two. They are absolutely incredible, and I will tell you this one, same thing. A friend gave it to me when I took on a new leadership role and turn the ship around. And the same thing. It's that I intend to, right, like motivate people to take the helm and get after it, and you know, state something, make a claim into what they want to do, and use that brain power and sort of kind of own it. So thank you all so much for inspiring and taking the time to connect people across all these time zones. You're very much appreciated.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Captain Davis. Thank you, Captain Allen, for everything. It is almost 1900 here in the East Coast, and so I don't want to keep anyone any longer. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now. Give me a second. There we go.